Hello world. This is the little guy in the corner. I'm the colonel. This is the Red Fleet. Say hi to Sally. She's on the big screen.
Oh, hello. I have to introduce myself again, right?
No,
Hello.
no more
Hello,
introduction.
everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, especially my student and those people in my Gen Z, in my Marxist Gen Z group. You gotta watch this to the end. And well, I'm a teacher researcher in Vietnam, and today we're going to talk about the leadership of horizontalism. I hope that after this conversation, it's roughly around 1 hour or more, a little bit. You all people could join us in the Zoom meetings, and then we will discuss together with all of you. I will put the link in the chat so you can come. Okay? Yes. Continue, please.
Yeah, so much for that. That was, I don't know, what are you? Is it a rabbit? I think it's a rabbit.
Oh yeah, yeah. Why do I wear like a bunny today? Because there are many Gen Z people, and all of my students are watching me, and they say, all of my podcasts are so boring, so they think that I should do something to entertain them to be more interesting. So that's why I'm wearing like a bunny today. You happy? You guys happy? Hmm?
Of course we are. Follow the white rabbit. And today we've got some new flesh to burn through in this show. Say hi, Mayor. May you introduce
Thanks.
yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Hi, my name is Maor Levitin, and I'm a political theorist based in Toronto, Canada. I specialize in the critical social theory of the Frankfurt School, and I study and explore the question of left leadership and engage the leadership versus horizontalism debate, which we'll be talking about today.
Cool. And who else do we have here? It's so bright. I don't see you, Axel. Axel.
Yes, Axel Schulz from upstate New York, right next to the Canadian border. I wish I had this beautiful rabbit hat because it's again very cold in my office, and I need to bring a hat of some sort next time. I have to remember that. So, yes, I teach European history, modern European history. I specialize in everything related to the last 200 years of modern European history, especially intellectual history, the history of the labor movement, the history of Marxist thought, socialist thought, the history of exile and refugees, and the history of the so-called real existing socialism experiment and the Cold War. And very much excited about this discussion and very curious what answers we will come up with. And of course, the topic is very broad, so whatever we might conclude will obviously be tentative and provide food for further discussions.
All right. Um, so much for no introductions. I need to be more stringent in my change of policy. However, let's dive right into it. So, we've prepared some questions. Not we, our Queen Sally did. Of course, she did. Uh, where's the first one? There. According to Erich Fromm, people often fear freedom because freedom demands responsibility. How should a leftist organization be designed so that people dare to take responsibility rather than find ways to avoid it? Sally, what do you think?
Okay. Oh, yes. So, letting you all know that my point of view is toward leadership more than horizontalism. And so I want to begin by Fromm, and he said that people often fear freedom because freedom always comes with responsibility. When no one designs for us, when no one protects us, we must think and choose by ourselves. And for many people, this is very difficult and stressful. And in politics, this happens a lot. Some people hide behind a strong leader because it feels safer, and some other choose a horizontal model where everyone is equal, but responsibility is not so clear. And in different way, both can become ways to avoid real freedom. So I think the things that I want to address here is not like do we need leaders or not, but I want to ask a questions that is what kind of responsibility do leaders take and how do they work with the group? You know, Marx never believed that revolution happens without organization. He always stressed the importance of theory, learning, and strategy. And people can become active subjects of history only when they have knowledge and understanding. And he strongly criticized the dictatorship, but he did not support chaos. Movement needs democracy and debate, but also political skill and collective responsibility. And I want to mention Adorno a bit here because he warned that people often like to give their thinking to others. When we trust one person too much, we feel comfortable, but we slowly lose our ability to judge. Still, this does not mean all leadership is bad, and the problem starts when leader cannot be questioned. And in real life, we can see that successful horizontal movements are not leaderless. For example, the Zapatista Army of National Liberation in Mexico or the autonomous system in autonomous administration of North and East Syria. In the cases, power is shared, leader can be changed, but some people are always responsible for, education, organization, and coordination. And so that's why I support leadership, but because I believe in responsibility for knowledge. In every serious movement, some people must be ready to read more, think more deeply, and analyze more carefully, and share their ideas with others. This is also a kind of work and contribution, and of course, leadership is meaningful only inside a democratic system. Leadership must accept criticism, be relatable, be transparent, and take responsibility. Without these, leadership become domination, dictatorship, and with these, leadership can become like something like a service. And on the other hand, horizontalism without responsibility for knowledge can lead to confusion a little bit here. And everyone is equal, but no one really carries the common work. So the solution to make leadership democratic, leaders should not stand above the group. They should stand inside a group with bigger duties. And in this sense, freedom is not about staying outside. Freedom means thinking together, deciding together, and taking responsibility together. Yes, that is my answer. Thank you.
All right. Axel.
Sure. Let me give it a shot. I think there are no magic formulas in terms of, providing a final answer to whether horizontalism or leadership. And then Sally pointed out there is leadership within horizontalism as well. So I don't know what the counterpart of horizontalism would be. Verticalism, perhaps. In any event, I think it is important, in addition to exploring whether there is one potential best or universal model for leftist organizations, to ask what the implications are, and to again, pose the question, should there be one single model for all organizations, for the entire ecosystem of leftist organizations? And not everyone would want an ecosystem of leftist organizations. There's still those who want to see the development of a single party that unifies all leftist groups into one. So my personal take is that there probably should be a variety of different forms that might be mutually complementary, because the historical situation, the specific task that an organization has to solve, all of these things will require slightly different apparatus. So I'm skeptical as far as grand universalist solutions are concerned. But building what both the best forms of horizontalism and the best forms of leadership and verticalism should emphasize is helping to build the capacity for people to develop their own abilities, their own potential. And that is something that Fromm emphasizes in virtually all of his books. I was rereading part of Man for Himself yesterday. And at the very beginning, there are some quotes, and I want to briefly look at two quotes, one by the Buddha. Be a lamp unto yourself, be your own reliance, hold to the truth within yourself as to the only lamp. So here's the idea, of course, of cultivating insight, cultivating knowledge within yourself. Do not rely on any external authorities. And at the same time, there's another statement, another quote by Spinoza, on the same page at the very beginning of this book. If the way which, as I have shown, leads hither seems very difficult, it can nevertheless be found. It must indeed be difficult. It must indeed be difficult, since it is so seldom discovered. For if salvation lay ready to hand and could be discovered without great labor, how could it be possible that it should be neglected almost by everyone? But all noble things are as difficult as they are rare. So this focus on being self-directed, from very much identified with the definition of Marxism as the theory and practice of working class self-emancipation, but he advocated for a great deal of rigor. You cannot really be free if you don't take what it is necessary to really think through the implications of freedom, and that is hard work. Being self-directed requires more than just arbitrarily rejecting things, not doing things you're told. It means saying no to things. It also means saying yes to things, being willing to take on responsibility. So education is very, very necessary. Organizations, leftist organizations, must emphasize political education. They must emphasize education in the spirit of critical pedagogy that develops capacity on part of people to become self-directed, because being self-directed is not something that we necessarily naturally develop within these oppressive capitalist societies.
Nice. Maor, what do you think?
You done? Okay,
Yes.
Maor?
Okay, sorry, I'm going to jump in now. Thanks so much. I just want to say, first of all, this is so far a really wonderful and illuminating and interesting discussion, and I'm happy that we're diving right into these thorny and complex questions. I'll take a minute, if you don't mind, to clarify some of the terminology. I think horizontalism has come to mean, and by the way, horizontalism is, I think, the ascendant perspective among leftists these days, and has attained a kind of common sense status among a lot of leftists. And I think it is the predominant model of the way the left understands itself and how it should organize. And I think that horizontalism has come to mean it is a strong anarchist undercurrents that influences, and it has been shaped by the ultra globalization movement of the late 90s, and also the the occupation of factories in Argentina in the early 2000s. And so these are manifestations, in a sense, of social movements that have embraced horizontalism, but helped shape how we understand the concept. And the latest iteration of a horizontalist social movement on the left has been Occupy Wall Street, one of the latest at least. Occupy Wall Street, one of the sort of well-known ones, and it helped crystallize all these movements, helped shape and the concept and our understanding of it, and contributed to the crystallization of this common sense and of our understanding of what it means, right? And what it means essentially is a rejection of top-down hierarchies, right? As Axel has referred to, what Axel has referred to the vertical model, um, and centralization, right? It's also a rejection of centralization. What it embraces, on the other hand, is and it also, by and large, rejects representation as a legitimate democratic form. And so it embraces direct democracy, it embraces direct action, things like mutual aid, and it also embraces, in varying degrees, spontaneity. I think is an important value for horizontalists, and this is something that because it's become so common sense on the left, it's in a sense hard to challenge it, right? The horizontalist consensus. Oh, and consensus, by the way, is another important value for horizontalists, and there is a kind of procedural dimension to it, right, as expressed in sort of the General Assemblies of Occupy Wall Street. But it raises the question of, I mean, we talk about leadership, and that's already kind of taking us a step further than we can before, because we first have to talk that we can go before we talk about authority. I think authority is really the key issue here, and there are responses to horizontalism. There are critical responses among leftist scholars who argue that, well, hierarchies themselves might not be such a bad thing, not always at least. And I shy away from using the term hierarchy, although I've used it before, because I do think that it carries a generally negative connotation. But I don't shy away from using the word authority in a positive sense, right? I think authority can have um, a positive impact and can help guide organizing on the left. But the question is, what resources do we have? I think that in saying that, I fully reject the top-down model of leadership. Right? And I don't think that top-down leadership represents an ethical form of authority by and large, and does tend toward it does have authoritarian tendencies, right? And so I think that the trick is to think leadership anew in a way that responds to the horizontalist challenge while recognizing that authority is not always bad, while recognizing that the leftist social movements require some direction, some organization, some coordination, and the horizontalist model simply does not provide that. And one major criticism of horizontalism, and I think that's come up in what you were saying, Axel, is that it purports not to have leaders, but in fact, leadership, informal, unaccountable leaders oftentimes do arise in horizontalist movements, right? And Occupy Wall Street is a case in point. And so what I try to do in my research and my thinking is to conceptualize leadership anew. And I turn to a tool, a resource that is underexplored and underused in this connection. And that is the critical social theory of the Frankfurt School and the thought and ideas of Erich Fromm in particular. And I have more to say about this, but let I let the next person speak for now.
Okay, that would be fuck. That's me. I don't even know, guys. You're brilliant, folks. Not just guys and girls. That was amazing. Um, you you mentioned authority. That's interesting. My head had something like that, but I was thinking inspiration and muse, uh, how art works. There's some authority in truth and beauty. So we could look at this from both of those. So there's something about leadership being developed new, I guess, which leads us, interestingly enough, to our second question. If freedom is not simply the absence of command, but the capacity for self-determination. Does horizontalism or leadership better help people develop the capacity and real organizational practice today? Sally, you want to take a stab at that?
Okay. Yeah, so before I jump to the second questions, I want to a little bit summarize what has happened in the question number one so that everyone can catch on because later some of them will go and discuss with us. For the questions, I agree that freedom always involves responsibility and that both like obedience to leader and pure horizontalism can becomes ways to avoid that responsibility. And the key issue is not whether we need leaders, but what kind of leadership we build. And leadership should be democratic, transparent, open to criticism, and rooted in knowledge and collective learning. And also emphasizes the self-development and political education. He argues that freedom requires discipline and intellectual effort. While this is important, his focus risks placing too much responsibility on individual self-cultivation without fully addressing how power is organized in practice. And Maor highlight the dominance of horizontalism and call for rethinking authority in ethical terms. Right? Okay. So overall, the discussion suggests that need pure horizontalism nor reaches hierarchy is sufficient. But we always have to find a good model based on shared knowledge and collective accountability remain necessary for building effective and emancipatory movement. Does that work?
Works for me.
Okay.
Excellent.
Okay. So now I will jump to the second questions. Let me repeat what Cole just asked all of us. If freedom is not simply the absence of comments, but the capacity for self-determination, does horizontalism or leadership better help people develop that capacity in real organizational practice today? All right. So if freedom means only the absence of commands, but the ability to make the decision and take responsibility, then democratic leadership help people develop this capacity most effectively in real organizational practice today. So according to Fromm, freedom is a capacity that needs to be developed and practiced. People become free when they learn to think independently, understand their social condition, and take responsibility for their choices. And this capacity grow through education, participation, or collective experience. And from Marx, people become historical subjects when they have knowledge, organization, and the direction. And self-determination develops in environments with strong theory, cooperation, and clear common goals. Social movements that build shared understanding and political skill create the condition for real freedom. He also emphasized democracy, debate, and active participation. Clearly, in the Paris Commune, debate with the anarchists, and at the same time, he saw organization and political competence at the foundation of freedom. People learn to govern themselves through discussion, collective decision making, and share action. If I mention Frankfurt School, I don't know here a bit because he also connected freedom with critical thinking and self-reflection, which I think is very relating. And organizational bases that support learning, dialogue, and analysts help individuals strengthen their independent judgment. And in practice, many horizontal models create open and equal participation. When they include political education, coordination, and knowledge sharing, they help people develop cooperation and self-management. Their long-term success is closely linked to members who actively organize learning and strategic thinking. Democratic leadership provide a strong environment for political role, and in this model, leadership take responsibility for political education, social analysis, and long-term vision. And at the same time, leader work under collective supervision and public discussion. Members take part in learning, debating, and decision-making process. Through this process, people build confidence, judgment, and a strong sense of responsibility. And freedom developed as a social skill shaped through collective practice. And for this reason, democratic leadership within a participatory system helps people develop self-determination in a stable and lasting way. And this model brings knowledge and participation, direction and criticism, and the individual responsibility and collective responsibility. And through all of this framework, freedom appears as the ability to understand social reality, join collective decision, and share responsibility. So in short, I want to say that freedom grows through responsible leadership within genuine democracy, where each person is supported in becoming an active and mature political subject. Okay, Axel?
Yes, okay, very good. There is this famous quote by Eugene Debs. It's a short quote, so let me read it quickly. I'm not a labor leader. I do not want you to follow me or anyone else. If you're looking for a Moses to lead you out of this capitalist wilderness, you will stay right where you are. I would not lead you into the promised land if I could, because if I let you in, someone else would lead you out. You must use your heads as well as your hands and get yourself out of your present condition, as it is now the capitalists who use your heads and your hands. So to me, any socialist organization, especially when it comes to its long-term objectives, must play a key role in helping to develop the capacity for working class people, for the exploited and oppressed to develop their own skills and abilities individually and collectively to run their own affairs. Indeed, I mean, that can be done in different ways. I very much agree with how problematic top-down leadership models are. The authoritarian aspects of the real life experience, etc., etc. At the same time, the ideals of democratic centralism. Democratic centralism was supposed to work in terms of full freedom of debate and discussion. People on different levels, the local level, the regional level, the national or federal level would come together, propose ideas, discuss ideas, and only after some time votes would take place. And once votes have taken place and clear majorities have emerged, for the sake of political effectiveness, the principle of unity in action was implemented, where people were supposed to support the decisions of the majority, not the decisions of some party leadership, not the decisions of some politburo, nothing that resembles any kind of substitutionism, but the democratically arrived decisions that were the result of a fair democratic process. And then, as I understand democratic centralism, even after a vote has taken place and people were supposed to support the decisions of the majority and follow this principle of unity in action, debate and disagreements were not shut down. The issue could and should be revisited. So to me, this is in some ways an attempt to combine different aspects, have elements of horizontalism combine it with a way that would perhaps address one key problem of horizontalism, which is in some ways, the inability to really work efficiently and to single on particular tasks, and to also build lasting organizations that can withstand changing political situations, that will be there when people get tired and cannot maintain occupying public spaces any longer. Those kinds of issues. So yes, I think again, I would advocate for a multitude of mutually complementary approaches, and think very systematically and clearly about the implications of each approach and what each approach would lead to. But it has to be a collective learning process. And indeed, yes, there cannot be too much emphasis on individualistic solutions, but we all have to emphasize political action, learning through experience, and incorporating what we have learned through experience into our political practice. And whatever leadership exists, it has to be a rotating leadership. We cannot have a system where people maintain leadership positions for decades and decades. I think that has been proven very corrosive in large organizations, such as in the Soviet Union and East Germany, and in small organizations such as tiny Trotskyist groups. People need to move in and out of leadership positions, and newcomers need to learn leadership skills and abilities, because the point is to enable everyone to develop these kinds of skills and abilities, and not for people to become attached to positions. The danger of substitutionism is always there.
Mm-hmm. Substitutionism, yes. Oh, sorry, Mao. Please go.
No problem at all. If I may jump in for a few minutes here, I'm finding this discussion extremely helpful and useful and sophisticated. It's a very important discussion that we're having here, and I agree with a lot of what Axel and Sally are saying. I mean, the emphasis on responsibility, collective self-determination, rotating leadership. I think these are all important values that we need to subscribe to as leftists. And I will say this, I reject horizontalism, but I don't reject it entirely, right? Because I think they're right about certain things, the horizontalists, right? They're right about direct democracy, direct participatory democracy. They're right about sort of direct action. They're right generally. They're right about the need for the most important thing that I did not mention before, and this is probably the most important component of horizontalism that we have to state explicitly. It's prefiguration. And this is actually one of the main criticisms leveled at Leninist style vanguardism, is that it is not a prefigurative model. Prefiguration really presupposes an affinity between means and ends, right? The means of bringing about meaningful social change the ends have to reflect, sorry, the means have to reflect the ends, right? And that means that they have to be consistent. And we cannot use top-down leadership to bring down, to bring about a society that is genuinely fully democratic in the full sense, and socialist in the full sense, in the meaningful sense, right? That has to happen. That has to be reflected. It's a process that unfolds and reflects in the way that it unfolds the objectives, right, of the project, right? And so horizontalists subscribe to, and they very explicitly subscribe to prefiguration, and I love that. I think prefiguration is extremely important. I think the left, social movements on the left have to be prefigurative. They have to practice, they have to bring about in their daily practices and routines what it is they seek to bring about as an end goal in terms of radical social transformation. Right. And so I embrace these values as well. But I think where the horizontalists are wrong is in thinking that that's necessarily incompatible with leadership. That they tend to think that now that leaders or authority means that it's somehow antithetical to democracy inherently. And I don't think that's true. Right? I think certain kinds of authority, forms of authority and leadership can facilitate democracy and enable it and empower people and teach people, inspire people, and teach people to be leaders in their own right, which is something that you touched on in your answer, Axel. I think that's important, right? But I think that's a function of leadership, and I think the right kinds of leaders, they know when to come onto the scene and they know when to disappear. They're not there forever, right? They enter the scene strategically, and they have a role to play. They're real individuals. I mean, there is an attempt to rethink horizontalism. There are critical approaches to horizontalism on the left now, and some of the leadership and some of the scholarship and some of the literature and the scholarship. But there is still kind of an impulse to not state explicitly that we need individuals who are leaders, right, who are in positions of authority. And I think we do. I think we need to state that explicitly because I think they're needed at least sometimes. Although I think that what leadership looks like will vary by context and location. And there's no, I think you're right about that, Axel, as well, that there's no universal prescription. There are different models to experiment with, and the different models will work in different contexts. But I do think leadership is something that we need to be open to. That's really kind of my main claim, that leadership is not necessarily an evil thing that we need to reject offhand, right? And I think that we can further conceptualize leadership. And I think that what healthy forms of leadership might look like. And I think that Erich Fromm and some of his thinking about the concept of rational authority in particular, right, provides the pillars, the building blocks for thinking authority anew, for thinking a healthier kind of authority that knows and understands its own limits, that understands that it's not eternal, that is more kind of fluid in nature, and understands that even though it can inspire, it can educate, it can um, enable, empower rather, right? It also understands its limits, right? And
Mhm.
it's a healthier kind of authority. And the concept of rational authority, at least there are other concepts in Fromm that capture this, but rational authority is one of those concepts in his corpus that reflect an acknowledgement of the need for some leadership on the left, although it's underdeveloped in Fromm as well. But this idea of rational authority entails, you know, really refers to a form of authority that is thoroughly democratic, right? That promotes and accepts accountability, that understands its own limits, that understands its duty to empower others and enable collective self-determination, and among other things, right? So really, it's a way of thinking of. I sometimes refer to rational authority. I think that this concept gestures towards ethical authority, and that's what I sometimes call democratic authority. But to my mind, more or less, the two are interchangeable, right? And this is what we really need to be thinking about if we're to challenge horizontalism. It's to think about healthier forms of authority that embrace democracy, that empower and enable democracy, and do not that are inherently anti-authoritarian. That's the task that we have to set ourselves. And that's part of what I try to do these days. But thanks for listening.
All right. That was quite a bit. Wow. So
What do you think, Coin?
here's
What do you think?
a lot on my mind right now. I'm thinking of my old print shop. You know, I was a leader in the industry, just a little bougie, crapping
You're an
print
honor,
shop
not a
with
leadership.
5 people, but we had a serious financial crisis when I took over business from my stepmom because she kind of gamed for her, not for me or for the business. So we had to shift around, staff get shifty. I had some advisor brought into the company, and we did exactly that. We worked through the old hierarchy my dad kind of set up as the master of the company and the total king of everything, having his eyes, and he was just sniffing on everything and keeping the ship tight. And we remodeled the ship and worked with the people and tried to find a common cause, tried to open the books, tried to work on this together because I was also falling apart personally. And so that's something I would definitely do again because we've been successful. Kind of not in the business. The business crashed and it was too much debt. Thanks, stepmom. But I learned a lot from this, found a lot of new friends. And so here's a quote. I want to throw at you guys that my brain just made up mangling another quote. Could you say that freedom would be a modality in which class is being dissolved or unalived?
Modality.
Yeah.
Mm.
You know, class difference and the whole bit of alienation that comes from that kind of loses its meaning when you find a common cause and when you fight for something together. Then class becomes something else because you're part of this new comradeship, you know? So maybe that might be a way to think about leadership in another way. I don't know. Just some random bullshit, actually. Nobody?
Well, that means that freedom and leadership are prefigurative and are foreshadowings of a post-capitalist, socialist way of organizing society, because freedom, by that definition, and I think that is correct, is really impossible under capitalist alienated relations. There's, of course, the fantasy of freedom, and freedom is defined very simplistically in capitalist societies as, you know, the absence of coercion, which is not even true because there's so much coercion in capitalist societies. But yes, in a society that is based on alienation, there cannot be any freedom. And if we want to break out of that, our socialist organizations have to reflect forms of organization that transcend these capitalist mechanisms in the capitalist logic.
Right. Cool. Okay, then let's go on with the next question. When a collective faces crisis, failure, or pressure to act quickly, does horizontalism or leadership enable more effective action without losing its emancipatory spirit? How might Fromm read this dilemma from a psychosocial perspective? Sally.
Okay, what is important? I must repeat it again and again because remember, audience, we're going to have a discussion and I will put a Zoom link on the chat. Okay, so remember to join us later. Don't go away. And okay, before I jump to the question 3, I still have to summarize shortly about what we all have been discussed. So for the question number 2, I have said that freedom is not just having no commands, but being able to think, decide, and take responsibility. And according to Fromm, freedom is developed through education, participation, and collective practice. More than that, and democratic leadership help people learn, cooperate, and become active political subjects. And also agree that people should not depend on leaders. He emphasized self-thinking, democratic discussion, and rotating leadership. Organizations should help everyone develop skill and take part in decision. And Maor said that horizontalism is important for participation and democracy, but leadership is also necessary. He argues that good leadership can inspire and empower people. He referred to Fromm's idea of rational authority, which means democratic, limited, and accountable leadership. And so overall, the discussion shows that freedom grows through learning, participation, and shared responsibility and democratic leadership. For Coin Park, he wants to acknowledge his mom and dad. He wants to thank his mom and dad for giving him a print shop, and he has contributed a lot for the community. He also pay his staff well, and he wants to say that he knows the leadership. Okay. So now I will jump to the question number 3. Okay, let me repeat the question number 3. So when a collective faces crisis, failure, or pressure to act quickly, does horizontalism or leadership enable more effective action without losing its emancipatory spirit? How might Fromm read this dilemma from a psychosocial perspective? All right, yes. Yes. So, when a collective rises, failure, or strong pressure to act quickly, democratic leadership helps to act effectively while keeping its emancipatory spirit. And in stressful moments, when time is limited and emotions are unstable, a group needs clear coordination or clear task and shared direction. Leadership in this situation helps bring resources together, unite action, and prevent confusion or division. And when leadership works inside a democratic system, it builds collective strength instead of replacing the collective. Well, I have a lot of problem with the Bolshevik model, but let's not talk about it here because people are going to point a gun against me. And social struggle always need organization, strategy, and cooperation. And Marx understood that movement face not only external pressure but also internal crisis, right? So that's why we need so many sociologists to study people within the organization to have them with their conflict internal moments. Anyway, yes, in such moments, effective action depends on strong organization and shared political awareness. Responsible leadership helps maintain discipline, direction, and political strength while staying connected to the group. And from a psychosocial point of view, Fromm would understood that this problem through fear and responsibility. Crisis increases anxiety and insecurity. And in these situations, people often want strong authority because it brings a feeling of safety. This is a common human reaction. However, Fromm also believes that the mature freedom means taking responsibility even under pressure. It means learning to act consciously in different conditions. A psychologically healthy organization helps people stay calm, keep trust, and work together. And democratic leadership in crisis creates stability and encourages shared responsibility. This kind of leadership does not create dependence. It helps people grow emotional and politically. It reduces panic, strengthens trust, and build collective awareness. And in this situation, leadership does not weaken the spirit of emancipation. It's protected through transparency, responsibility, and close connection with members. Leadership helps the collective keep its direction and political dignity during crisis. And therefore, in urgent moments, democratic leadership helps the group act quickly and effectively while keeping its emancipatory spirit. And this model combines discipline, awareness, and psychological maturity. It makes people strong in organization and stable in mindset. However, I still want to emphasize that we need more sociologists, religious study, anthropologists, many different disciplines, and get into our organization to study people, to study the people needs, and then they can unite people. We must unite people not only within the organization but also the conflict between them all. Yes, Axel.
Yes, I very much agree with this. It's a very complicated thing because in reality, when organizations are faced with crises, there is a great temptation to protect the organization, to act quickly and effectively, and to perhaps prioritize short-term goals more so than the long-term objective of, the emancipatory mission, the overall emancipatory mission. Finding a way of combining these things is more difficult and meets the eye in practical terms. I apologize because I have presented so many quotes, but there is yet one last quote I want to present. It's from Bertolt Brecht's famous poem, In Praise of Learning. And I think it is useful to read it and to look at some of the specific lines. Study from bottom up for you who will take the leadership. It is not too late. Study the ABCs. It is not enough, but study it. Do not become discouraged. Begin. You must know everything. You must be prepared to take command now. Study men in exile. Study men in prison. Study wife in the kitchen. Study old age pensioner. You must prepare to take command now. Locate yourself at school, homeless folk. Go search some knowledge, you who freeze, you who starve. Reach for a book. It is a weapon. You must prepare to take command now. Don't be afraid to question, comrades. Never believe on faith. See for yourself. For what you yourself don't learn, you don't know. Question the reckoning. You yourself must pay it. There are different translations of it. Prüfe die Rechnung, du musst sie bezahlen is the original German. So check the bill, you have to pay it, which is a very wise line. And I always hate having to check bills, but it is worthwhile doing that. Set your finger on each small item. Ask, where do you get this? You must prepare to take command now. And it's, of course, from Bertolt Brecht's play of Maxim Gorki's novel, The Mother. So democratic organizations can maintain their emancipatory mission only in times of crisis if they have developed a strong cadre that has these capabilities. And I was always very impressed by Bertolt Brecht's strong focus on the egalitarianism. Leadership is not something that is unique to certain people. Leadership is something that is accessible to everyone. You know, even the elderly have to prepare for leadership. Everyone is to be a leader. That is the purpose of the organization, to build capacity for universal leadership. Doesn't mean everyone will necessarily have the same gifts and skills and abilities, but theoretically, everyone should become a leader, which does not mean everyone is a leader. It is a process. It is a difficult process. It requires qualifications. But the party or the organization needs to be a conveyor belt to build these capacities. And that has to be thought through very carefully so that, you know, this kind of infrastructure exists when moments of crisis come, because I have experienced moments of crisis in leftist organizations, and I have experienced some form of horizontalism where all members were encouraged to vote, and the way they voted, I personally still think it was not the wisest choice. There have been no good choices, but there's always a danger of people panicking, of not thinking things through, and the opposite end is, of course, people then in leadership positions saying, you see, we cannot trust, we need to maintain power in our hands because only we have the experiences and only we understand things in ways rank and file people don't. So the building of capacity is very important. And going back to the psychosocial dimension, Fromm makes this famous distinction between the different character types that develop in societies, including our capitalist society. He writes about the receptive orientation, the exploitative orientation, the hoarding orientation, the marketing orientation, and all of these character types are part of a non-productive orientation. And the alternative to that is a productive orientation. Productive not in a capitalist sense, because in the capitalist sense, being productive means to produce for somebody else, right? And Fromm points out that being productive is not the same as being engaged in activities. You can be engaged in activities. You can do a lot of shit and be profoundly unproductive, because being productive means it has to be self-directed. It has to be you having overcome alienation. So that is what has to be, that's what Fromm would say has to be at the very core in terms of the capacity that needs to be built in order for organizations to maintain their emancipatory core, their emancipatory mission. Thank you.
Well, it's let me pick up where you left off, Axel, because this idea of productiveness is actually key to my thinking about ethical forms of authority and leadership. Because I think that what Fromm was really gesturing at in his work was productive leadership, right? Genuine leaders were genuinely democratic and accountable and know when to step down and know their limits and are productive leaders. These are psychologically mature individuals who are able to, are not just self-directed, of course they're self-directed, but they have a kind of openness to the world and others that is reflective of full psychological development and maturity and the ability to meet everyone on their terms, right? Meet others in an authentic, engaging way. And this, by the way, is not limited to the human world. It also connects with the non-human world, right? Or the more than human world, or whatever, however you want to think of it. And so yes, productive leadership is really, and I've written about this, and I think it's a very important concept. I wanted to go back to this issue of rotating leadership and formal leadership, right? I think you're right. We need to rotate leaders. I think that everyone in the community needs to build up their leadership capacities, and I think that most people are capable of leadership and are able to develop leadership skills in one form or another. We need to encourage people, leftist organizations, to take on leadership roles. Having said that, there's a caveat. I think that it's okay, informally, for there to be people in the community who stand out, who serve as who provide inspiration, provide hope, who are able to educate people, who have what I like to call moral authority. Not everyone, a lot of people can develop leadership skills. Not everyone is going to have the same kind of moral authority. And that's important to recognize. And having moral authority is not a bad thing, right? It can be a very, and that oftentimes when I talk about leadership, folks, I'm not talking about uh, I'm not talking about formal kinds of leadership. I'm very frequently referring to informal kinds of leadership that carry with them moral authority. Now, a person who I think had this, by the way, and who, in a sense, played a leadership role in relation to the student movements of the 60s and 70s was Herbert Marcuse. It's a discussion for another time, I suppose, but he had moral authority, and that's not a bad thing. In that sense, he was a leader, right? And I think Fromm, in his own way, was a kind of leader too, as a public intellectual, and he had a kind of he spoke with moral authenticity and a strong, powerful conscience, a humanistic conscience, to borrow terminology from Fromm, right? And so I think it's okay to have moral authority, and for some people to have more moral authority than others. I think that's always going to be the case, folks. We're not going to be able to get rid of that. I think socialists have to kind of come to terms with the fact that we like to circumvent this question, to sidestep the question of authority completely. And I think the assumption oftentimes is that socialism will have done with authority completely. I'm not so convinced about that. I think that what socialism will have done is it will have humanized authority, right? The kinds of authority that are left over are the kinds of authority where you have genuine, authentic moral authority that informs the community, that educates, that is a source of democratic power, really. And I think that's not a bad thing. But I think it's something that will likely be left over. It's something that we should probably be working towards, and it's not a bad thing. I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah, I want to add, it reminds me of Alexander Bogdanov's novel Red Star. I'm not sure whether anyone has read Red Star. It's about this future communist society that has developed on Mars. It was written in the early parts of the 20th century, where a Bolshevik activist is taken by the Martians, who are essentially like the humans, just a little further ahead on the path to socialism and communism. And on their way in their spaceship to Mars, he realizes there is no clear command structure. There is no real permanent division of roles in terms of the captain and the first officer and the second officer. It switches based on what region of space they're in, because in each situation, different people have different expertise and familiarity. So leadership is based on what people are good at, what their expertise is. And it is, not something that is based on bureaucracies and having been appointed, but on, the crew recognizing those are the most qualified people for the job. And for this particular region of space, he should be the captain, and then she should be the captain because she's more familiar with that region of space. And I found that to be very interesting. Not again as a magic formula, but as a new and fresh way to think about authority and fluidity, and something people can recognize. Leadership not as something that makes you special, but something that makes you functional in a community where it is your way of making a contribution. The other thing that comes to mind very briefly is Dorothy Thompson, the wife of E.P. Thompson, stated many years ago how she always believed as a young communist that most people want to be politically active, as in making politics the center of their lives. And then she came to realize that is not the case for most people. So some will do that, but many will probably just go to a few demonstrations here and there and then focus on other things. So different people have different priorities, and thus we should recognize political leadership does not make you a special human being. It just means you have particular interests and particular capabilities, but there are other types of leadership. There's artistic leadership, there's literary leadership, there's leadership being a kind human being, and they're all equally important. They just need to be as developed as they can possibly be within their particular realm.
Excellent.
That's it.
This is a very good conversation. I've got some random mere observations, actually. We've talked about emergency capitalism. I've seen reactions in chat mentioning stability. Then my hair stood up when I heard non-productive orientations. It's the kind of stuff I'm doing on a daily basis to develop actually productive ideas. So in my head, this entire concept of productivity needs to be revamped as well, because I've got it all on its head. I'm thinking about climate change. I'm thinking about extinction as a species. I have different problems than just profits and, I don't know, my margin. So I think this is also where authority would come in as a way to win hearts and minds, and not as a way to oppress and reproduce hierarchies. So there's a lot there. And interestingly, this also, again, would lead us to our last question. If, as Fromm suggests, freedom requires a certain level of psychological maturity, how does horizontalism and leadership cultivate different kinds of political subjects? And in today's context, which kind of subject is more capable of living with freedom and long-term responsibility? Sally, you want to take a go at that?
Okay, let me just shortly summarize what was going on with question number 3. I said that democratic leadership helps provide coordination, reduce panic, and keep collective responsibility in urgent situation. And Fromm would see crisis at a moment of fear when people seek authority for safety, but mature freedom means staying responsible and conscious. And Axel agree and emphasize the importance of education, reparation, and building leadership capacity in advance. And he shared an example from a novel about a socialist society on Mars, where leadership changes based on people's skill and experience in each situation. Leadership is not fixed or bureaucratic, but flexible and based on competency. He also knows that not everyone wants to be politically active all the time, and that different kind of leadership are all valuable. And Maor also agreed and spoke about reductive leadership and moral authority. He said good leadership are democratic and accountable and knows their limits and have other roles. And then coins also makes us all questions about the non-reductive thing, because the authority happens not only in the political party, but also in climate change, in NGO, in many different kind of organization, or even in our life. And I think that all speakers were on the same page here. Effective action in crisis requires to learn, share responsibility, flexible and democratic leadership, and we have to build trust, and so that our movement can stay strong and emancipatory. Okay. Now for the last questions, folks, remember to go to check the chat section, because we're going to discuss later. Okay. And now for the last questions here, I want to repeat it. If, as Fromm suggests, freedom requires a certain level of psychological maturity, how do horizontalism and leadership cultivate different kinds of political subjects? And in today's context, which kind of subject is more capable of living with freedom and long-term responsibility? Okay. Yeah. So, according to Fromm, freedom is not only the right to choose, it is also the ability to take responsibility in a mature and stable way. This requires emotional balance, independent thinking, and the courage to face uncertainty. And different organizational models have created different kind of political subjects. I forgot to mention about the gender studies in the United States has been shut down because of Epstein files. I don't know why that happened, but that probably a big question here. What is going on in the United States? And I want to continue. And in horizontal movements, members are encouraged to participate equally, share ideas, and make decisions together. And this model help people develop cooperation, openness very important, because many people they are very shy in an organization. Not many people are open up to talk about their thinking, or some of them having the difficulty to speak what's on their mind. The communication skill is a key here, and a strong community spirit. And with good political education and organization, horizontalism can support self-management and collective awareness. Um, and still, at a psychological level, horizontalism can sometimes create a quick responsibility when guidance is limited and no one clearly take care of knowledge and strategy. Some member may become passive or only emotional involved without developing strong long-term self-determination. And democratic leadership create a different environmental. In this model, we will roll through a learning, discussion, and structural political practice. Members regularly engage with theory, strategy, and organized decision making. This process helps them develop judgment, self-control, and strong sense of responsibility. And I want to mention marks. People become historical subjects through organization, learning, and collective action. Leadership connected to political education is help individual link personal experience with broader social goals. This is to me the most important, because I'm also a leader of my organization, and it's my my most crucial role is to help people talk about their feeling, talk about their ideas, because it's very hard for them to speak a word. And and informed psychological maturity means living with freedom without dependence, fear, or the need for father figures. And democratic leadership support this maturity by combining guidance, dialogue, and shared power. And in today's world, with economic pressure, media influence, and social uncertainty, the people who live well with long-term freedom usually have a strong knowledge, a self-reflection skill, inner discipline, and collective responsibility. These qualities often grow more clearly in democratic leadership systems where individuals receive support, challenges, and real political training. Um, so horizontalism develop equality and community spirit, and it's help people speak their own ideas. And democratic leadership develops psychological maturity, judgment, and long-term responsibility. In today's context, political subjects from through democratic leadership and education are usually more capable of living with freedom and long-term responsibility. And in Fromm sense, they are people who not only want freedom but are also emotionally and politically mature enough to live with it. Yes. Axel.
Yes, all I need to do is replay what you just said and add my name to it, and that will be my perspective too. No, of course, I very much agree. At the very beginning, I used these two quotes, and I remember when I looked at man for himself and found this quote by the Buddha, I was at first a little bit ill at ease because quotes by the Buddha or the Dalai Lama and other figures that are regarded as part of quote esoteric traditions in Western pop culture. They are often somewhat problematic in the ways they are used because and perhaps I should look at and read that quote again: be a lamp unto yourself, be your own reliance, hold the truth within yourself as to the only lamp. And people like that idea. We don't rely on anyone else, we rely on our own perspective. But that is also in many ways a great delusion, because so many people believe they're relying on their own ideas when they're actually relying on the ideas of other people without acknowledging it and without realizing it. There's an essay I assigned to my students. It has an obnoxious title, but I assign it because it's very provocative. The title of the essay is "No, You're Not Entitled to Your Own Opinion." And the purpose of that essay is to make students angry, so they actually end up reading it, and to essentially encourage people to not just have opinions, but to think through their opinions and to understand whether these opinions are truly the things they actually believe. And Fromm, when he criticizes relying on authority, argues, there are two kinds of authority. There's the overt authority of someone telling you explicitly, some party leader, some political leader, some business leader. But then there is anonymous authority, public opinion, cultural patterns, common sense, either religion or science, just unexamined opinions that are in circulation and are very fashionable. And in too many instances, when people say, be lamps unto yourself, we're not really lamps unto ourselves. We just recycle other people's opinions, the opinions of anonymous sources of authority. And that is not what Fromm wants. Becoming truly able to rely on ourselves is hard work. It forces us to really not just go for the lowest common denominator and embrace something that seems like something very convenient to believe or subscribe to at this moment, but to do a lot of hard work in terms of thinking. Again, building capacity takes effort. Building capacity takes effort, and just because we're not overtly manipulated does not mean we're not being manipulated. So that is, I think, what leftist organizations need to cultivate. Not just inoculate us against overt authority, but against the dangers of anonymous authority as well.
Can I jump in?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you, friends. So this discussion is next level. It's so interesting and sophisticated. I'm genuinely enjoying it, and I'm learning a lot as we go. So thanks, friends, for discussing this and for engaging on this topic. I wanted to bring up kind of unusual source for thinking about a different kind of authority, for conceptualizing authority differently, and it has to do with Fromm, but it has to do with the prophetic Jewish tradition that he often
Yeah.
relies on, right? And there is he draws this important, very important distinction in conceptualizing and theorizing ethical authority. He draws a distinction between prophets and priests, right? And what distinguish and there's actually, by the way, just FYI, there's a wonderful essay on this very topic written by Professor Dustin Berg, uh, explicating this theme in great detail, and I recommend that everyone reads it. But anyway, I mean, the essential distinction that Fromm makes is between the prophet and the priest, and the priest is the person who wields power in a way that reinforces the status quo, right? That normalizes power relations and hierarchies as they exist in society, right? And sort of affirming the existing values, and sometimes even sort of oftentimes providing them with a veneer of legitimacy, right? Which is why they're so problematic. Now, the prophet, on the other hand, are people who question power, right? They themselves are in a position of power, come into a position of power, they're catapulted into positions of power by questioning power as it exists in society, existing relations of power, and by questioning and calling into question domination. And in so doing, they exercise a kind of power, but it's a power that's serviceable to and promotes democratic ideals and freedom, right? So it's not a bad thing. It's welcome. But the problem is, one small problem arises because priests sometimes pretend to be prophets, right? It's not always clear, right? It's not always clear who the prophet is and who the priest is. And this requires some intellectual work, some deciphering, and it's tricky. But I think the distinction holds up. I think it holds to critical scrutiny, right? Because some people are genuinely think of Martin Luther King Jr., right? In his role as a in challenging the status quo, racial discrimination, and calling into question power, and of course talking about capitalism as well, right? That wasn't absent from the picture, right? It had a kind of prophetic presence. I think that's very true in the Frommian sense, and I think that that's something to talk about. And I think that something to there's also an essay of Fromm's where he talks about the hero and the martyr, the difference between the hero and the martyr. And he differentiates and he sort of associates the martyr with the Jewish tradition, arguing that, you know, martyrs are biophilic. They love life. They don't, they sanctify and love life and would never sacrifice themselves if they don't have to. But they also affirm their responsibility to the community and to educating people in the community. And it's a very it's a short essay that Fromm wrote on the subject. I wish he had said more about it, but it's also worth reading. And it touches on this issue of authority, moral authority, and leadership. Um, but overall, right, I think that there are moments in Fromm's work. It's genuinely, I have to admit that it's underdeveloped, but uh, there are moments in Fromm's work that gesture toward the possibility of ethical leadership, of ethical authority. I would go so far as to say humanistic authority, right? And I think that's important. I think that's something that we need to. We I sometimes I'm hesitant to say this because I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's possible that this will not disappear. Even not only will it be an important dimension of an aspect of getting us to socialism, but even under socialism, when we're there, it will not necessarily disappear. right? Not necessarily. It's possible that it will, right? And I just don't think that. I think the horizontal ideal, right, at its best, right, it really stresses the importance of egalitarianism, of everyone sort of playing a leadership role, although it equivocates about whether we can accept the fact that some people as we can accept as desirable that some people can have more authority in the community than others. And I think under certain circumstances, at least, it is okay. It is okay and it is desirable, and we have to accept that. And that's where I depart from horizontalism. But basically, right, these values of direct democracy, egalitarianism, direct action, challenging representative forms of democracy, and calling into question the domination that often comes with them. Right, I think that's all valuable, and we cannot. So I don't think we should ever reject horizontalism wholesale. I think there's a lot of there that's valuable. It just needs some nuance. And I think that Fromm and the critical theory of the Frankfurt School helps us provide such nuance to this kind of discussion and debate.
Wow. Yeah, okay. So I think we had like, I don't know, 80 minutes or something. Illustrating to the world why this is the shit and the train, so maybe you should jump right on it, get on top of it. Where's the CIA money? So join the discussion. I'm going to post the entire thing, repost this on the Patreon side, and in the comments under the post will be a link, so you all can join the discussion. Anything else? Anything I forgot?
Yeah, everyone,
Mao,
please. I
you
just
have
want to.
Mao, you're
Sorry,
going
go
to
ahead.
accept many people. Yeah, just sorry, please go on.
I was just going to say, I really encourage everyone to join this conversation because we want to hear your points of view and your perspectives, and we want to engage others in conversation. So please do join us.
Absolutely.
All right. Then I would say this was the show. See you next time. Bye-bye.